Hi, my name is Gavin Bottrell. I run a small company called Golf. I do hickory golf events. I buy and sell old hickory clubs and old golf balls. And in this video, I just thought I'd tell you a little bit about some clubs which I acquired a few weeks ago. Somebody contacted me and they had a bunch of clubs that they'd found in their house in the middle of England, and they asked me if I wanted to purchase them. We agreed a fair price, and anyway, I acquired a batch of about 40 clubs. Now, within this batch, I spotted an older wood, and I have it here, and I thought, well, I recognise that it's got a scare neck, that is the head and the shaft are spliced to each other. There's a sort of diagonal join running from here down to here, so the head is glued to the shaft, and then it's bound over with this linen weir pin. And typically scare neck or splice neck clubs like this were made before 1910. So I thought, oh well, that's quite a nice early-ish example of club. And also I could just tell by the shape of the head here, which I'll go into in a little bit more detail in a minute, again, that it was likely from the gutter ball period. So up until, or let's say before 1899, all balls, and I have one here, were made from solid tree sap that comes from Malaysia, called gutta percha. And this material is rock hard at room temperature, but you put it in boiling water and it can be moulded into a sphere very easily. So that's an original gutta percha from the 1890s. So anyway, I had a quick look at this club and I noticed that it has a brass sole plate. It's green at the minute. I've done absolutely nothing to this club, and so that's a brassy, so typically made for playing off the fairway, but equally, given the amount of loft on this club, which isn't a lot, I would say there's probably about 14 degrees of loft on there, you could equally use this from the tee. So I looked at the name on it and it says James Paxton Maker Guernsey. Now the name Paxton may be familiar to some golf collectors because there was a guy called Peter Paxton from Musselburgh who once finished second in the Open Championship. So I had not ever seen any clubs stamped James Paxton before, but had a quick look in some reference books and found out that he was the nephew of Peter Paxton, and he was born in Musselburgh in 1874. Now, I also discovered that he had then been appointed the professional at Guernsey Golf Club in 1900, and he'd stayed for a period of 3 years from what I can ascertain. So it's quite good when you get something like this and you can really tie it down to quite a tight period of time, only 3 years. So I was quite pleased with this club. The other thing which I've just noticed, which I'd not noticed beforehand, is it has a nice shaft stamp there, James Paxton Guernsey, and a big thick sheepskin leather grip. I was just wondering there whether this shaft is hickory or ash. Actually, I think it's hickory. Pretty sure it's hickory. So I was going through the rest of the batch of clubs that I'd purchased, and I came across another club which is actually a putter, but putters of this age have quite a lot of loft, so sometimes they're styled as putting cleeks. Probably got about 12 degrees of loft on there because the greens were quite longer in them days, And anyway, looked at this club and it says J. Paxton, Guernsey. So, aha, I've got another one. And carried on looking through the set and found another one. J. Paxton, Guernsey. Carried on looking, found this time, this is a quite a low lofted club. This has probably got about 20 degrees of loft. I should have said the other one has probably got about 35 degrees of loft. J. Paxton, Guernsey. And also here, it's stamped, warranted, hand forged. Just in a little circle there. So then, carried on looking and found another club. J. Paxton, Guernsey. So, what do I have here? Well, I quickly realised I've got essentially a full set. Now, in those days, playing with the gutter ball, the game was a lot more played across the ground, a lot less lofted shots. The gutter didn't really fly as well that high. So actually, it doesn't surprise me at all that there's no niblick in this set, or like a wedge, to give it, one might say, a more modern name. So the most lofted club is probably about, well, probably I'd revise that. It's probably about 40 degrees, and that's that one. Okay, about 40 degrees loft. So they've all got their original grips, big thick sheepskin grips, which would have been held two-handed, probably curling the top thumb round the shaft rather than placing it down. And anyway, I thought, well, that's quite nice to have a set of clubs that you can really pin down to a very tight time period. So let me just, for comparison's sake, I've got here some clubs from a slightly later date, and I'll just highlight what the differences are, you see. So should you come across some similar clubs, you'll be able to tell. So I spoke earlier about the scare joint or splice joint, as opposed to this 1920s club that has a socket, so the shaft is going into the head, and often you can see, as on this one, you can see the end of the shaft at the bottom. So also, when you look at the thicknesses of the necks here, this gutter period club, there we are, the neck is probably twice almost as wide as this one, and that was necessary to really make a club that was robust when hitting the very, very hard gutta percha ball. In terms of face depth, this is actually, the gutter club is deeper as well than this later one. They're both brassies. Okay, so you can see how the brass will clean up if I choose to do so on this one. A little bit more about that in a minute. And it's actually, the face has got probably the same amount, I would say, of bulge. So that's bulge in the horizontal plane like this, which is something that club makers discovered about 1885. They discovered that having bulge was a very advantageous thing, because if you hit the ball out of the heel from something called the gear effect, it will actually cause it to spin back on a trajectory towards the centre of the fairway. And similarly, if you hit it out the toe, it will actually spin on a trajectory back to the centre of the fairway, which was actually not well understood in the very early days of golf. So they're the two brassies. Now let me just compare a later 1920s iron. So let's see if I've got a niblick here, or sorry, a mashie or something very similar. Okay, I've got a mashie iron, and this is a Donaldson rangefinder from the late 1920s, made of stainless steel. So if I compare that, I'll put it next to the club, let's say, of similar loft. I don't know if they're exactly the same, but we can see what are the differences really. Well, these early irons don't have any face markings. They are smooth faces. The hosel length is actually, funnily enough, the same. So there's not a lot of differences really. The head length is actually very, very similar. The sole width is very, very similar. The top line thickness here is very, very similar. So actually not a lot really had changed between, in terms of design of these two clubs, between 1900, 1901 and probably about 1928, which is a little bit surprising. The grips are different. Certainly on later clubs you tend to find the leathers quite hard rind and actually a lot thinner than what you would find on later clubs. And if I just put the two tops of the irons there, you can see a bit of difference in terms of this is definitely thicker. Okay, just again for comparison, let's have a look at the putting club. Right, so actually in terms of loft, not too dissimilar. Again, the 1920s club, I would say, probably has 10 degrees of loft, and the 1901 club has about the same. What is actually quite noticeably different is the thickness of the top lines. You see, this is probably almost twice as thick as this. So the forging was just a little bit cruder. In terms of hosel length, there's not a lot in it, a little bit difference. The nicking around the tops is actually very, very similar. So again, quite surprising. But yeah, again, a thicker grip on the earlier club. So anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean up these early Paxton clubs, and then I will post some pictures and maybe some video to go with this commentary on them. And anyway, please, if you have any questions, please either message them to me or add them in the comments below. And thanks for watching. Bye.